At a time in the fandom where the discussion is intense and the memes are immaculate, we need to talk about Garp. I've gone back through and reread several Garp scenes. I want to go back and talk about several of his old scenes, as well as talk about what's happening here right now on God Valley, or in the flashback, in the chapters that we're reading right now, and what it all means and how we should be looking at Garp, at least from my perspective. First of all, I do want to note that at least at this point in the story, in the chapters that have been released now, we don't have any new information on Garp yet. We already knew that there was a manhunt happening. We saw it up close and personal. We knew that a prize had been taken from Fuloled, and the Rocks Pirates and Roger Pirates joyfully came in to take it back. We knew that Garp took a vacation at that time until he learned that Roger was there, and then he rushed in to gleefully come after him while the Navy cheered. We've gotten a ton of new information on Rocks, Roger, Harold, but as far as the core aspects of God Valley and how all of that affects Garp, or how he affects it, nothing has changed yet. We're really waiting for the new information to come still at this point. But we're here to analyze Garp, so let's go back and look at his history first, and then we'll circle back and we'll talk about God Valley some more. Starting with Garp as a stand-in father. Garp takes on 2 kids that are not his own, and he entrusts a lot of their upbringing to Dedan. He considers the boys' time with her to be trading for them. Garp's own training style is the kind that's really only acceptable in anime, and he seems to consider a peaceful upbringing to be the kind that doesn't shape a strong man, which is why he wants the boys to be raised where they are. When we first meet Garp in story, he takes on a bit of an antagonistic role, and I think that Garp attacking while Luffy is trying to leave is more of that same sort of tough love with the goal of making him stronger. At first he says he won't sink them because of their status as his family, and he says that he'll just disobey orders no problem. So it seems odd that he would just seemingly turn on a dime. And I don't think that he changes his mind because he wants to give the appearance of following orders. He really doesn't seem to have a problem with doing whatever he wants. I think it's just more of his anime style training to make sure that Luffy is strong enough. Luffy seems to roll with it as if that's what he's used to. He even wants to meet up with Garp again after this. Now this could just be Luffy being Luffy, or it could be him knowing that this is how his granddad trains him because of past experience. What's clear is that Garp wanted Luffy to get away. He's pleased that he's gotten himself out of another life-threatening situation Garp has put him under. He wants Luffy to succeed, and he's proud that he can. Marineford, the ace execution. Garp refuses to accept comfort for the fact that his family is about to die, but it's made abundantly clear how agonized he is over this, panel after panel. And his torture extends when Luffy shows up too. He wants his family to seek justice the way that he does. He doesn't want his family to be opposed to his beliefs, and he doesn't want to have to choose between them and his own dream. During the war, Garp does stop people from rescuing Ace, and he stands in the way of Luffy when he tries to get to Ace. He tells him, "If you want to get to Ace, you have to get through me." I think we start to see his resolve as Vice Admiral waver when Luffy tells him that he can't fight him, and Garp urges him, "Do it, or Ace will die," urging him that this is what he must do to save his brother. Again, I don't think it's because of appearance. I think it's the inner conflict that he has. What he believes in versus loyalty to his family. Even as Garp goes to punch Luffy to stop him, Luffy and Ace's childhood memories flash before his eyes. We literally see his inner conflict on page, and then turn the page and see him surrender the fight. I'm not trying to rewrite this scene to say that he was good here. I actually don't think that we're supposed to read it as him being morally right. I just think that we are meant to read his inner conflict through the scene. Garp initially chose justice over family, and then he chose to let family usurp justice, even if he couldn't be the one to do it. This doesn't make him good, this makes him complicated. And when Ace is killed, Garp warns Sengoku that if he's not held back, he's going to kill Sakazuki. In that moment, all balance was gone. His attempt at suppressing his family loyalty for the sake of his beliefs and his goals and everything that's driving him is gone. And when he returns to the bandits to make sure that they're safe during the turmoil that's arising after the war, he lets Dadan beat him, yell at him, and accuse him of choosing his job over his family. He takes it all, probably because he knows that he deserves it. Okay, finally, let's talk about what's driving Garp. Let's look at the Kobe rescue. Garp trained up the Marines that were in his care to leave the old man behind and save the baby. He taught them to invest in the next generation. What we see from Kobe and the others is a dedication to protecting the people. They don't just want to save the one person or save themselves. They want to save as many innocents as they can. And that is who Garp is willing to sacrifice his life for. That's what makes him enter into a battle directly opposing strong forces. That's what makes him stand up and fight so that they can get away. I believe that this is his dream that he's willing to put above everything. The future of the Navy, led by the next generation. I sincerely think that we see Garp's dream in this scene. It is the next generation. It's a better era for the world. In Marineford, when it was looking like Whitebeard was going to destroy the Marineford for Ace, Garp said, "Bring it on," to the idea of this era coming to a close. I do think that's what he's fighting for from the inside. I'm not looking at these scenes thinking of Garp as everything that he does is correct ultimately, that if we look at it from a certain angle, we see that all the time Garp has been making the right choices. I actually don't think that that's really Oda's writing style. I think typically he tends to look at things from multiple angles and show characters that are very flawed and that are capable of making very wrong choices or causing harm to a lot of people, while still also having noble goals, or at the very least, complex ideals. I think we kind of see that in Garp, especially in Marineford, where we know that there is a greater goal that he's fighting for. There's a reason he's still a part of the Marines, and I don't think that it's because he's just the Marines' dog that'll do whatever they say. I think that's pretty apparent in his character that he's not just doing whatever they say. I think that it's because he has a higher dream and he's trying to put that dream above everything. But in Marineford, when he's faced with the conflict of what about your family, we watch him wrestle with that and agonize over that. He wants to still put his dream first. He wants to still fight for what he believes in, but ultimately when he's faced with his family, with stopping his family, when he's faced with stopping Luffy from saving Ace, I read the scene as him making the choice to take the hit from Luffy, to close his eyes and let him punch him. Not because he's trying to create some sort of appearance for the world government, but because he can't put it all above his family. There's too much inner conflict there. But regardless, he could have stepped in and tried to save Ace, and he didn't. I'm not trying to propose that he was right. I'm trying to show the complexities that were at war within him in that scene. Yet, when he had a protege who I think was everything that he was trying to shape and was the embodiment of what his dream is, which is someone loyal to the Navy, willing to work from the inside to protect the people, not just protect the one person that he's going to rescue, like Shaki, right? Everybody's there going to try to rescue Shaki. But Kobe doesn't want to rescue one person. He wants to save all the innocents. He wants to free all the slaves. Kobe is the embodiment, I think, of what Garp is fighting for, an internal reform of the Navy, the next generation. He wants the last generation to move aside. A lot of his dialogue is reflective of this belief. He wants the current generation to move aside and make room for what's going to be better. We see Dragon doing much the same. Dragon gave up fatherhood. He gave up being there for his son for the sake of his greater dream, which is to take down the world government. He wants a better era as well, and he's going about it in a completely different way from his father. Dragon looked at the horrors that the Celestial Dragons were committing, and he said, I want out of this broken system. In fact, I want to set myself opposed to it. Garp clearly does see the horrors as well, and we'll talk about that in a second, and he wants to stay inside and cause a reform. They both have complicated relationships with the people that it's their task to raise. Dragon, it was his task because he's a father. Garp, it was his task because he took on the role of father when Dragon asked him to. They're neither one perfect at that role that they should be fulfilling. because they have a conflict between that role and pursuing their dream of a better era. Oda regularly does this in his story, where he takes a topic and he shows it from multiple angles, and he doesn't necessarily say this one is right and this one is wrong, but rather he shows people fighting for something and he shows them doing it in different ways. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening here with these characters. Dragon is fighting for a different era from the outside, trying to topple what is in power that's causing harm. Garp sees the other option as piracy, which we can look at the world of One Piece and see that every pirate is not Luffy. In fact, many, many, many are not. And creating a vacuum, a power vacuum, also may not be better either. I'm sure Dragon has plans for what happens after the topple, but Garp's goal, his dream, I think, is to reform the powers that be and to also topple what this era is. He's not perfect, but he's complicated, and he's human, and he's fighting for a better era, just like Dragon. They're just doing it from different angles. I think we can also draw a lot about Garp's character from the fact that both Dragon and Roger entrusted their kids to Garp. When Roger is captured, he tells Garp to take care of his child. Garp even reminds him that his orders are to hunt down anyone associated with Roger. But Roger trusts him implicitly, to the point that he gives Garp more information than he'd have had on his own, and entrusts his child to him. Despite them being rivals, despite their history, he trusts Garp with his kid, even as Garp still stands with the Navy. I think that says a lot to the context that we don't have yet. Children were being hunted down, and Garp was aware of it. Yet he didn't stand opposed to the infanticide that was happening under the world government. But he was also there at Ace's birth, and it's not like he dropped him off with Dedan and never saw him again. He was around to some extent. That doesn't make him a perfect father, and it doesn't make him perfectly right. There's a lot of nuance to every decision that he's made. There's a lot of good and bad involved in what he does. I'm concerned that the way I worded that sounds dismissive. I'm not trying to argue that these acts are equivalent or that one cancels the other out. The point I'm trying to make here is that we have to take in all aspects of his character to make a judgment on him. And I think it's fine to take it all in and decide that you don't like Garp. I'm not really trying to make a video to convince anyone into liking him or hating him. I'm just trying to illustrate that we do Oda's writing a disservice if we don't engage with the good and the bad that's written into his character. I think the fact that both Roger and Dragon stand opposed to Garp's dream, or at least the way he's going about bringing about a new era, yet when they were unable to be the ones to raise their own kids, they entrusted Garp with their kids, I think says a lot to the fact that their ideals weren't so far apart, even if their means to reach their ideals were opposed. If Garp were this gleeful oppressor that the memes depict him as, which I'm not objecting to because the memes are hilarious and we should keep them coming, but if Garp were this gleeful oppressor, there's no way Dragon would ever entrust his kid with him. Especially because it's not like a Roger situation where he's dying and doesn't have a lot, he's dying and imprisoned and likely doesn't have a lot of options. Dragon's alive. He's got friends. He's got connections. And he chose Garp. I think we can read something from that. I think it's also worth noting that Dragon defected during this flashback when he was still, I think, a teenager, and started up the Revolutionary Army very quickly thereafter, as far as we're aware, yet he hasn't been actively opposing the world government until now. And I do think that Garp has a greater plan with the world government than just reforming it from the inside, but I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. Now, looking directly at the difficult things, yes, Garp is fully aware of a lot of the evils that the world government participates in. An easy example is the slave auctions. Garp is fully aware of the slave auctions, and he doesn't externally appear to care. But honestly, the Straw Hats aren't that far off. They're outraged, sure, but only really talk about that outrage in relation to Cammy. They even watch a man kill himself right in front of them to avoid whatever terrible fate awaits him if he were to be sold. And their response is, when's the mermaid being brought out? And I'm not trying to minimize what they do in this scene or how satisfying it is to watch the Straw Hats go directly against the Celestial Dragons. I'm just trying to point out that there's nuances here in a lot of different directions, not just Garp. Luffy tends to only get involved in things after someone that he cares about is directly affected, which kind of makes sense because realistically, it's difficult to have a character just save the entire world, at least every single time in one fell swoop. Luffy is not really a hero for hero's sake. He doesn't walk up onto a land and say, wait a second, evil is happening here, let me put on my cape. It's usually not until someone that he cares about, he sees them being harmed, that he says, okay, it's time to punch that guy in the face. Okay, let's get back to God Valley. Garp enters God Valley with one thing on his mind: Roger. As far as we can see at this point, he seems to not really care about the manhunt that's happening. And yes, Garp did already know that it was happening. He called it the Celestial Dragon's little field trip. He knows that they took the prized possession or the treasure of Fullaled for their little field trip, and he even warned them, hey, that's probably not a good idea. There will be repercussions for this. They're gonna come back and get the person. He may not have known every detail about it because it does seem that they were trying to keep it under wraps to some extent, but Garp also knew. At least on some level, he knew. Rox, Roger, and Garp, all three come bursting onto the island smiling. They engage in fights with their rivals, and they have one thing on their minds. Rox isn't here to save his homeland and everyone that lives on it. He's here to save his wife and his kid, and that's it. He doesn't care about the rest. Roger isn't here to selflessly end the slaughter of innocent lives. He's here to watch his best friend steal his girl, and now he's gonna bail. Dragon is the only hero here. Well, actually, Eva and Ginny are the heroes here. But from the perspective we have now, everyone else is gray. Dragon is the only one that stops, looks around him, and does whatever he can to save whoever he can. Not just the ones closest to him, but any innocent life that is entrusted to him. And then changes his entire life course to oppose the ones that would do something as terrible as this. And I think it speaks volumes that the only other survivors of God Valley, of the God Valley incident, ally themselves to him and his cause. And again, the point of me pointing all of this out isn't to say, look, everybody else is bad, so Garp's actually good. It's more just to show the nuance that there's a lot of moral gray happening here, not just Garp. My camera died and I can't find my charger, so I'm on my phone now. It's similar to how Dragon told Kuma, I can't save Ginny. The woman you love, who's now been kidnapped and subjected to sex slavery, we cannot save because we have a bigger mission. And even though Dragon defected from the Navy and probably formed the Revolutionary Army a long time ago, his larger scale, okay, now we're going after the world government, now we're taking down the Celestial Dragons, that didn't begin until very recently. So realistically, a lot of time has passed where a lot of people have been harmed, and Dragon couldn't directly go and save everyone along the way because he was setting up a wider plan. I think it's very likely that we're going to learn something similar is happening on Garp's end, not just training up the younger generation, but probably a wider plan that we're not yet privy to. And it's really easy for us to say, look at Garp, look at how powerful he is. The man can oppose the world government right now, yet he doesn't. He continues to work for them and let them continue to do these things. But honestly, I feel like we could say that about a lot of characters in this story for how strong they are. Not necessarily for working for the world government, but how strong they are, and they appear that they could oppose the world government if they wanted to. Yet the world government have remained in power for hundreds of years. I have to think that there's a reason that so many characters are biding their time. Obviously, the next couple of chapters are going to shine a massive light on how we should be viewing all of this, but it is possible that the next couple of chapters are going to make Garp look worse and not better. Because the first time we heard about God Valley, it was Sengoku telling the story. He said that there are many legends about Garp, but he never wants to talk about how he got his status at God Valley. He said that Garp's moral compass is that he doesn't protect the Celestial Dragons, and a major reason that he doesn't want to talk about God Valley is because while he was there, he had to protect them. We can guess from that information that it's possible that whatever we're about to watch Garp do in the next couple chapters, he himself is disgusted by. Now, it's also possible that what we're going to see is Garp being used as a tragic pawn in the government system. Sengoku said that Garp teamed up with Roger to go against Rox in order to protect the Celestial Dragons and their slaves. So there is another possible scenario where Rox watches his wife die, loses his mind, and then plans to wipe out the entire island in a fit of rage. But Roger and Garp team up to stop him, thereby protecting the Celestial Dragons as well as the slaves, only for the world government to Lulisha the island and all the innocents on it, which the world government then covers up, and also covers up the legend of Rox so that the whole thing will just be forgotten. More likely than either of those scenarios I just laid out is that Oda has thought of something better than I have, and we're all in for a ride. But what I'm trying to say is, I know that a lot of us want answers from Garp now. We want to either see a flashback or we want to see Garp and Dragon have a conversation. We want more context around Garp because he's not looking very good right now. But I'm just saying we might get it and we might not, because Oda is a long game storyteller. It's not uncommon for him to give us a fraction of a story or a fraction of a character, even one that might distort the character if we only have that piece of information. A lot of times Oda just trusts us to take all the evidence that we've been given and not necessarily look back on all the previous information through a jaded lens, but rather collect it all, hold it all together, and try to analyze as we go along and as we wait for him to give the full information. And it wouldn't surprise me if he does that here too. I'm not saying he will. I hope he gives us more information on Garp. I just wouldn't be surprised if he makes us wait. I personally think that Garp is working towards a reform of the Navy from the inside, while also biding his time for a bigger plan, much like the Revolutionary Army are. He knows of the atrocities that the world government are committing, and he knows that people are being harmed and dying while he's working toward a greater goal. But he is also working toward that greater goal. And we just, as the readers, kind of have to decide what that means to us and how we respond to it. Obviously, we the readers want the people that are being harmed and killed right now to be saved right now. But I think we have to assume that sheer strength isn't enough to topple the world government at any time, and that it's going to take a lot more than just that. I think even just what we've seen of Imu so far and the powers that he can give to those directly under him should make us think that. Present time, the Revolutionary Army have begun to act, and I think we'll probably see that from a couple others as well. Not just Garp, probably Shanks and some others that want to see change, that want to see a new era. Reminder again that the goal of this video isn't to paint Garp in sunshine and rainbows, but rather to say he is, I think, definably gray. I don't think it's worth much to overlook all the people that suffer and die at the hands of the world government while he isn't in action, or overlook the complexities of where his inaction has directly affected people, to include his family. But I do think that it's worth something to look at how incredibly nuanced he's written, and to remember that there are a lot of morally gray characters around him as well, which makes the story more fun to discuss and makes us internally look more at what would I do in such a seemingly impossible situation? At least until Oda tells us more. But what do you think? Do you view Garp as a hero, as a scoundrel, or as morally gray? Please do chat with me more in the comments. I'll see you again soon. Bye.